society. And I'd like to thank you for letting us come into your living room this evening. It's a chance for us to speak to you as cultural trustees of your town and your village. And it's a chance for us to prove to you what scientists tell us is impossible, that it is possible to travel back into time. For as long as there are folks that are with us from their 90s, their 80s, their 70s, their 60s, their 50s, their 40s, it doesn't matter. History knows no bounds. For the folks that are out there that are in the high school today will be tomorrow's historical trust. Welcome, and tonight's moderator will be Grace Huntley Pugh, who will take us back into time. Grace?
What a responsibility to go back into time. At this time, we're going back 95 years. Can you believe it? 95 years. That's right, yes. In 1895, the village of Mamaroneck was formed from two parts of two towns. The town of Rye gave us Rye Neck, and the town of Mamaroneck gave us Mamaroneck. But our first guest tonight, Fred Wilson, was born before this even happened in 1895. Fred?
That's right, Gracie. Thank you very much. When I first accepted your invitation to take part in this stroll, I thought I'd like to take you perhaps further down the lane than you have ever been. So I will limit my remarks as far as possible to old Rye Neck. In the first decade, with the necessary drift back to 1895, and a slight overflow up to 1913 for reasons. To start with, Rye Neck at that time was a community pretty much concentrated in population-wise from Jefferson Avenue to Stewart Avenue, and from Union Avenue up to Barry Avenue. That was the center of concentration of population. There were no paved streets, no sidewalks, no sewers, no water or gas in houses, no autos, of course. The first autos came to Mamaroneck in that first decade, around 1906 and 1907. I know there were 3 that I knew of at that time who had cars. We had no sprinkling of streets. There was scraping. Yes, there was slight sprinkling. But I wanted to talk about the neighborhood stores. All of our shopping and foodstuffs came from 2 neighborhood stores. And one was Archer's. That was on North Barry Avenue. Presently occupied by a marine sales store and upholstery shop. And the other was the Hanford Burger store at the corner of Beach Avenue and Railroad Avenue. At that time it was Railroad, Halsted now. And that's where we'd have to run to get food for Mother when she needed it for dinner. The 2 stores of Archer here. Oh, in the Archer store, the first time I have ever known a lady butcher, Nora Reekers, was the butcher in the Archer store. And there I jump up to the second decade. She later became, and you'll remember the store, many of you will, Louis Stiebel, back in about 1917 or 18, he had a store where the first national building was built at 100 Mamaroneck Avenue, the huge store. Well, that was Stiebel's store in there in one of those spots, and Nora was his butcher. First one I've ever known, and I don't know one since. At that time, we had two policemen that I recall, and that was Pat Linehan, the father of Isidore Linehan, who later became postmaster, and Dave Seifert. They were generally on bicycles then when they toured around the village. We had two mailmen. Well, William A. Boyd was our postmaster, and the post office at that time is where Robert's department store is now on Mamaroneck Avenue. That's where the post office was, and William A. Boyd was the toastmaster. The two mailmen that I recall is Emil Shearer, who was then an elderly, the father of all the Shearer boys, like Charlie and Ben, those you will know, and another short man called Peanuts Fauché. They were the two mailmen. Soon after that, another one, Walter Morrell from Railroad Avenue, came in. This became my entire world, just that small area from 1895 to, let's say, 1905. It's your entire world. You go nowheres. But we had trolley cars then, and we had maybe two trolley car trips in the course of the summer or the year. One to go to White Plains for either a picnic, to Rye Beach for either a picnic or swimming, or both. The other to White Plains. And that was to go to this great big department store over there. Some may have heard of it, Sam Ellis's department store. While we had a couple of department stores here, Mitchell Sheffer, Moses Sheffer, and E.J. Connor, they had these dry goods stores and smaller stores. But this was a great big department store. And to get in that was something. We go get some clothes. I do want to now to rush along a little bit because of the time. I want very much to tell you about my family. Mama and Papa, that's what we always called them. Not mother and father, dad and ma. Mother, Papa and Mama. They were married in 1891 in New York City, and they came up to Mamaroneck at that time and lived for 1 year on Barry Avenue. I don't know which house it was, but I did know, I don't now. In 1892, we moved into 88 Jefferson Avenue. Now it's number 511, and a house in which Marshall Sauls has lived for quite some time. That was the house in which I was born in 1895. It was one of three that Dan Warren, who built, right at the corner. The Bulls were at the corner, Wilson's in the middle, and the Webbers in the next house. And we had no utilities, as I said. We did have a well outside, a cistern which caught the water from the roof, a nice garden, chickens and rabbits. I had rabbits. And not to forget a dog, Cubby, who finally was killed on the railroad. But Cubby, one other thing I can't forget and will never forget, the ominous-looking threat of a chopping block out in front of our chicken house. And they looked at that day in and day out. The other thing which was most unusual, and something I'm sure none of you have ever heard of, I told you we had no toilets or running water in the house, but we had a two-family outside chick sales. And we shared that with the Bulls. They would come around, get in one side, and we go direct in with the partition in the middle. In that house and in that perspective now, my sister Grace was born on April 25th, 1893. And I wanted to mention her friends because they connect up with people in that Rhinebeck area, the old Rhinebeck. Her great friends, and I have snapshots of them. Bessie Harriet, Tilly Harriet, Grace Turner. This is the Ice House gang now. We're down the end of Barry Avenue. Hattie Torrance, Adelaide Clark. Her father became a trustee of the village later on. And Carrie Krell. They lived down Jefferson Avenue on Grade Street, that little street running from Jefferson into the railroad. On February 11/4, 1895, I get 19 into it time and time again, is when I came forth to that area. 1 month before the village was incorporated. Dr. Matthew J. Hall was our doctor at that time, and I was called by him Bubbles, and that brought on the nickname of Bub, which I did with your dad and all those people, and I was Bub all through high school.
We're going to have to wrap it up now.
Hurry it up? I'll hurry it. I'll do the best I can here. In that house, however, we got deliveries from the Harriets and the Ice Company. Ice delivery, 5 cents, delivered right into your kitchen and put in the ice box. Milk came in from Inwood Dairy up in Harrison. Thad Davis delivered to the house, and the other was Sam Bruder, who brought vegetables around to sell at your doorfront. My school comes next. We go to Rhinebeck School, and it was built in 1893, the brick school building near Foresters Hall and close to Barry Avenue. There were 8 rooms in Assembly Hall. Mr. Bellows wasn't there at that time. But in the school, I went to school in 1901, graduated in 1913. There were 200 total population. There were 50 in the high school. We occupied 1 big room. And there were 7 in my graduating class of 1913. In 1903, 2 years after, Mr. Bellows came to the system, Frederick E. Bellows. But before I graduated...
They're telling me our time has come.
I can't help it. I'll quit if you want, anytime you want me to. I can't go faster. I can't talk faster. And in my graduating class, in the high school, the teachers were Turnbull, Starkweather, and Hakes. My class of 1913 had 7 in it, in which I graduated. And how they were concentrated. 4 of them came from Melbourne Avenue. And they were Yoda Appleby, Rita Weber, Clarence Bull, who was killed in World War I, and Minnie Fedder. And 2 from Beach Avenue, Austin Gedney and Fred Wilson, and 1 for Sophia Street, Vera Gillido. The class picture of 1911 or 1912 of the baseball team I had turned over to the Historical Society and the graduating class. My friends, because of limitation of time, I'll just try to mention the names, but in those times when you're a friend of one, you're a friend of the entire family. There's no question about that. To name a few, there were the Bulls, the Shearers, the Holtons, the Donnellys, the Pushkis, and the Webbers. They're the many families that I knew, and about 20 kids in the whole bunch, and all of whom had a favorable influence on our village. And I'd like to read just a note that I dropped down. They and their families contributed so much of that necessary ingredient of character, friendship, and togetherness, which I feel sure prompted my good friend and Mayor, Busty Santora, to tag us as the Friendly Village. It developed from that point. The fun and games in those days was swimming at Barry Avenue swimming hole down by the ice house. You're down the Mamaroneck River made a sharp 90-degree turn, and it washed out a beautiful swimming hole. That
Okay,
was
Fred, we're all going to have to take a swim.
okay. I thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we
I
have-
hope you've enjoyed strolling down the lane to the best. Okay.
So, thank you very
That's
much.
what I wanted to know,
And we'll
which I
get,
should cut out for.
well, we've gotten a lot, and we're very appreciative. You've been wonderful, and we do love it.
Thank you.
Every second.
Thank you very
And
much.
Charlie, now, it's your turn. It's your turn. So this is the microphone, and shall I hold it for you?
It's all right.
Or can you
I think
hold
I can
it?
manage it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Mrs. Pugh. Now, previous broadcasts have pretty well covered the subject of the strawberry patch, which was a nickname for what officially known as the Waverly subdivision. Look on your maps and you'll see that such is the case. And as I say, previous broadcasts have covered the area from about the time of the First World War up until the present time. But I thought people might be interested in how the area was before the First World War. And I might say that in that respect, why, as a very small boy, I had occasionally been brought down from Quaker Ridge, and we moved down to Fenimore Road around 1905. And I can assure you that the area was vastly different than it is now. So the streets were dirt roads. There weren't any sidewalks to speak of. One or two of the roads were what were called improved roads. In other words, they were macadamized, but they were just like the other roads, dusty in the summer, muddy in the winter. The only thing about the macadamized road was that it stood up better under traffic. Though any of those roads were subject to heaving from the frost and when the breakup of winter and so on. See? So perhaps the best description would be to take you on an imaginary walk. Presume that you got off the train and you were going to walk over to the area by way of Hoyt Avenue, commonly called Hoyt Street. But now this was an improved road. But runs from Mamaroneck Avenue to Fenimore Road. And at the Mamaroneck Avenue end, there were two houses. After you left those two houses, you had the railroad embankment on your left, and you had wetlands on the right. Very hard to believe that bushes and occasional large weeping willow trees grew in that particular part of the area. And arriving over at Fenimore, directly ahead of you was Connor and Depew's coal yard, where Morgan, Manhattan is now. And you made a right turn, and on the left side was the freight yard, and it was a much busier place than it is now. That is, as far as freight was concerned. And on your right-hand side was a small warehouse that Van Amerages stored ground pumice stone in until they were ready to ship it out. And across the track from that, there was only one railroad track crossing Fenimore at the time. Across the track from that was the abandoned building that had been the electric light plant. I believe they called it the Larchmont Electric Company. and that had been abandoned, and all the machinery and stuff stripped out of it. But the remains of the building stood there until quite a few years ago, and in there at the present time is the remodeling consultants, corner of Waverly and Fenimore. Now, the southwest corner of Waverly and Fenimore was a swamp. Kids used to go skating there. And on the other corner, what you might say the northwest corner, was a saloon. And to the east of Fenimore Road, Waverly Avenue wasn't developed much. There was no bridge over the river where there is today.
Charlie, did you like it better then or now? Did you like it better then or now?
Well, that's hard to say. And on Waverly Avenue, according to my notes here, let's see, I think there were about 5 houses. And the wasn't business place was the warehouse and stables of a beer distributor. And, well, proceeding along Fenimore to Center Avenue.
How old were you when you're remembering all this? How old were you then? Were you a little boy?
Yeah. Oh,
remembering
yes,
this?
yeah. Oh, yes, yeah. I had just started to school. And,
What year were you born?
Yeah. And there was a bridge.
What year were you born, Charlie?
Pardon?
What year were you born?
1899.
1899.
Right. Yeah. And Center Avenue, to the east, that is toward the river, there was a bridge that connected with what was called Clay Street. The whole thing is called Center today. And let's see, on Center Avenue, there were...
Charlie,
yeah.
I think we're going to have to keep going.
Right.
Tell us a real memory that you have besides the streets. Tell us something that was really the most exciting thing that ever happened to you when you were a boy.
Well, it wasn't anything particularly exciting,
Girls?
except that the first winter we were there, why, some Italians got into a fight in the saloon, and one man pulled a gun, and the man he was, just as he pulled the gun, another man stepped in front of him, and the man shot this third party and left
where were you?
Wife and family. Huh?
Where were you? Were you looking through the door?
We lived on Fenimore Road between Center and Fayette, and there was
Gracie?
Yes.
there was nothing too much exciting, and now perhaps you might be interested
Yes.
in the.
Charlie, Gloria's speaking to us.
Why don't you ask Judge Zingesser about Strawberry Patch? He was born there.
That's
Didn't
right.
you live there? No. You weren't born there, but you lived there.
Mamaroneck at all.
Maybe
Yeah.
have the microphone? Charlie?
5 years old.
I came to our village when I was 5 years of age. So that takes us back some 82 years. And I have a very vivid recollection of the appearance of that section of the village where we lived on Center Street. And that was a 4-apartment, flat-roof house, formerly owned by Adam Julier and his wife. And the title passed to Eddie Julia's wife. Eddie was a son, and he was our village court clerk for a number of years. And the title passed to his wife. And Adam Julier and his wife were very gracious landlords. And I remember the lovely Christmas parties that they threw for the tenants, and the Easter parties, egg rolling parties, and so on. And Charlie may remember that on Fayette Street there was a rubber factory that smelled to the high heavens. Later it became the Macintosh factory, and that moved over to where the AMP store is now located on Mamaroneck Avenue. And Bill Johnson, our former mayor and village manager, worked there at the Macintosh factory. And I remember also bathing with the kids in that area in the Mamaroneck River, right near that rubber factory. And Charlie, you must remember that.
He's speaking to you.
The,
Judge Singas is asking you if you remember
that rubber factory.
the rubber factory, the Macintosh factory. Singas, sir.
The rubber factory, Charlie. Don't you remember that rubber factory? Beg pardon?
He does.
Good,
It's a little
good.
hard to see around
Yeah.
the corner. Right.
Now, as Fred Wilson said, there were no paved streets in our village at that time, and the streets were not illuminated except for the Boston Post Road and Mamaroneck Avenue, and they were illuminated by gas. And we had gas in our homes in those days, in kerosene lamps. And as far as sanitary facilities were concerned, we had an outhouse. And I remember trudging from where I lived in that four-family house on Center Street to the old kindergarten, which is located now where the Seventh-day Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists,
Next to
with-
the Legion.
next to the American Legion Hall, which used to be the town hall. And I remember also attending the first school in the village of Mamaroneck, which is the old depot school on the corner of Mount Pleasant Avenue and Mamaroneck Avenue. The building, which is now practically vacant, people that took it over bought that entire corner, including the savings bank, the village savings bank. And I've often wondered why, for the few $1,000s it would have cost, why our village didn't buy that building. It would have made a beautiful municipal building. But those days are gone. And then I went to the Mamaroneck Avenue School the very first day that it was built. Since that time, it's been expanded. And from there, we went to the Mamaroneck High School, which is where the town administration building is now located. And there were 30 members in our class. Now, I understand there's something like 400 or 450. Now, yes.
Tell us what was the most exciting thing that happened to you when you were young.
Oh, there were many exciting things that happened to me.
Well, pick out one that would really tantalize us.
I don't know how to answer that question, Gracie.
May I answer it for me?
Yes, you had.
I don't have a mic here, but that's okay.
I can bring this
No,
mic up?
no.
No?
The other mic. I have to jazz this thing up. I'm afraid that nothing terribly exciting happened to my husband in his childhood. He was, as he has always said, his nose was in the books. And nothing exciting comes out of that. And I think he's the one who has told me that. So I don't think he can refute it. Now, I think you take that. Perhaps what Judge Zinga Professor can tell us is what was the most exciting case you had in village court?
Oh, I can tell you about that.
Tell us about that. Uh-huh. Go ahead.
I represented a client who was charged with driving while intoxicated. It happened on Christmas Eve. And we had a jury trial before the then first village justice of the village of Mamaroneck, Judge Holden. And it was a jury trial, and a number of witnesses testified as to the behavior of my client, and they tried to establish they didn't have any chemical tests or any other scientific tests at that time for intoxication. They tried to establish that he was intoxicated by his conduct. The police testified he couldn't walk a straight line and that sort of thing. And then they called to the witness stand a Dr. Hall. Dr. Hall, who's been mentioned here before. And Dr. Hall swore that this man was intoxicated. And I asked him, how can you be so sure of that? Why, he said, I could tell that he was intoxicated by looking in his eyes. And I was highly indignant. I didn't realize that there was something to what he had said, that you could determine a person's blood pressure by looking at his eyes. So I was as red as a beet, and I said to him, well, you tell me what my blood pressure is, doctor. And with that, a Mr. Koloff, steeplejack they used to call him, jumped up on his feet, and he says, yes, doctor, tell me what my blood pressure is by looking at my eyes. And in any event, my client was acquitted. And I want to tell you also about a Dr. Green, I think his name is mentioned here before. Dr. Green, some of you folks may have read The Great Mouthpiece, the story of Bill Fallon. Bill Fallon was formerly an assistant district attorney in Westchester County, and he became a very noted lawyer. And he had a client who was charged with poisoning a certain party, and Dr. Green sat up with Bill Fallon all night preparing the case for trial. And Dr. Green said to Bill Fallon, if you do as I say, your client will be acquitted. You tell the jury that this bottle of so-called poison isn't poison at all. I said, you drink it. And then, within 45 minutes, I want you down the basement of that building, and I'll pump your stomach. And so that is what was happened. And the client was acquitted.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry that we have to keep going because all these stories are so wonderful. But next on our agenda is Beresford Proctor. Also, 91, is it, Beresford?
Yes, so far,
Right.
so far.
We're really up there.
Thank you, Gracie. In 1907, when I was 9 years old, my dad moved us. I have to tell you that the us was his trotter mare, my mother, my brother Gordon, and myself. He moved us from Harrison to Mamaroneck, and Mamaroneck on the Boston Post Road, where the O'Neill Funeral Home is now. At that time, of course, the road wasn't paved; it was a dirt road. There were 4 homes between the Catholic Church and the Methodist Church. The first one was just over the Du Bois Avenue, and we were the second home. The third home was owned by the Maurice family. They had 3 sons and 2 daughters. Benjamin Maurice, who was the middle-aged boy, entered the services and was transferred to Texas. He, a little later, lost his life in a plane accident down there, and one of the trees on the circle of near the beach bears his name as a memorial to him. The Maurice property was a very large property. It extended from the Boston Post Road way back to Tompkins Avenue. Right now, the front part is the professional building, and the rear part is there are two-story either apartment houses or condominiums. It was a big piece of property. Well, anyway, after Ben died, the Maurices were interested in athletic events and helping athletes. And they allowed the MRLs, which is the Mamaroneck Recreation League, to finish off their backyard as a sporting field. They had all of the spaces filled up for all of the tests except the races, because there wasn't enough room for the races. But anyway, they were a fine group of athletes, and we were not old enough to become members of the MRLs, but we had the use of all of the facilities there, which was a tremendous help, I'm sure, in our development. Anyway, between the Mamaroneck MRLs and...
Beresford, can we hold on a moment? We have a telephone call.
Surely.
Line 1.
Hello?
Line 1, hello?
No, she's not
No.
getting anything on the
Okay.
phone.
No? No line 1?
No, this is a
Okay.
dead phone.
She can call back. Okay, Beresford.
Okay. Well, anyway, besides the back being made into an athletic field, the third. That was the third, and the fourth one was a property owned by William Samuel Johnson. He was an elderly person, a really beautiful person who, even though we were just kids, he still had time to help us. Just across the street from where we lived was the Oriental Yacht Club. That was in the time when the Oriental Yacht Club was doing extremely well. We were, of course, members and enjoyed the tennis courts and the swimming and the boating. At that time, we had a small motorboat, and my dad had one of the Swampscott dories. That class of sailing boats was very, very popular at that time, so that they were out sailing practically every weekend during the summer months. One of the persons who was really a terrific sailor was a George Fry, and he had his boat painted black, and he gave it the name of Tautog, which means that in our Indian language that means blackfish. Well, anyway, he was such a sailor that he shipped his boat over to Holland and participated in the dory class boats over there on the Zuyder Zee, and he won it. So he was the international champion of that class of of boats. It was a nice boost for Mamaroneck. I want to tell you that this George Gardner Fry lived just about across the street from where Gracie and Crescent Pugh live now. I know several other families up there. There was the Snow family. They had 2 daughters. They were great sailors.
Beresford, we're going to have to go along now.
All right, I'm just
Because-
about through.
Good. I hate to interrupt you,
Oh.
especially when you're talking about sailors.
Well,
I love hearing about
okay,
sailors, as you
all right, well,
know.
thank you.
But what we still have on our list are Herb La Rosa, Martha Estep, Jean Warrington, and Dottie Smith Beebe. And Dick Lederer came all the way from Scarsdale, too. Now, as you can see, we're going to be through by 9 o'clock. We've got 15 minutes. So let's divide the time up. Shall we start with you, Martha?
Well, I'm not quite a native. I wasn't born here. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but my father came here around 1903, and he worked for one of those, he drove the cars for one of those families in Orienta called the Darlingtons, whom I understand weren't very interested in the village. When the family died out, he stayed here, having met my mother, who was not from here, but they met here in Mamaroneck. And he opened a gas station, one of a gas station, if not the first in Mamaroneck, the corner of Keeler Avenue and the Boston Post Road. And I brought some pictures that will show them. I don't know whether you're going to... And then we lived at that time, I was about 19, I guess that was about 1915, and we moved permanently to Mamaroneck from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to live in what you people know, I guess, is the Benson Garage, but we knew it then as the little green house by the mill pond at the where Harrison Avenue comes down into the Post Road. And we moved from there in 1921 and my family bought the house on Tompkins Avenue between Melbourne and Beach, and believe it or not, I still live there. I graduated from Rhinebeck High School in 1931. Mr. Bellows was at the tail end, the end of his career, I believe. He was still the principal, but we did have a new high school principal by the name of Mr. Tyson. Miss Romaine had left, and she had been a fixture, I guess, there for many years. And I eventually became a teacher in the Mamaroneck school system, having taught in Mamaroneck Avenue School, and then was transferred to Murray, where I ended 32 years.
That's wonderful. I'm sorry that we have to be recognized as Herb La Rosa.
Compared to the previous speakers, I'm a new kid on the block. I was born here 71 years ago, and my parents were born here. I was born in the same house my mother was born in on Halsted Avenue. My vivid memories are mainly memories of the Depression. I was 10 years old when the Depression started. Today, we hear a lot about homeless and people in poverty. But when we think back of what it was here in Mamaroneck at that time, I think we all have to feel that we're survivors. I don't know whether young people today could have endured the hardships we did during the time. The bank had closed. It was one of the worst bank failures in the country. It didn't make any difference where you lived on either side of the post road. No one had any money. We got along as best we could. We used to do a lot of fishing, and this wasn't for sport. It was for necessity, by necessity. We clammed. We had gardens. And as Fred said, there was a chopping block out in the backyard for the chickens. We we salvaged everything. Talk about recycling, we did it. Nothing was ever wasted. Even the clamshells were ground up for the chickens. We had rag pickers. Mr. Bruder was a rag man. A junk man, I suppose you'd call him. He had a horse and wagon, and he had a string of cowbells across the back. Maybe this was the first idea for good humor, because when we heard these cowbells coming, we knew it was the rag picker or the junk man. And we'd sell a bag of rags or a pile of old metal for a quarter or whatever we could get. And it wasn't until more or less the Second World War that we really started to pull out of the Depression. Some memories. We went to school. Each year they announced the number of years of perfect attendance for each of the pupils, and it was a thing to be there every day, no absences. And I remember one time we had a good snowstorm, and I think I missed hearing the fire whistle. I wound up being the only kid in school that day. It's fun memories. We were poor, but we didn't know it. And I think that those of us who have survived the Depression have something a little in common, and we're happy to have lived through it.
Thank you very much, sir. That was great. That's the way we all felt about it, too. Dottie, I'm coming back to you and Dick, and here we are. So this is alive.
Okay. Well, Grace called and asked if I would come and say a few words about my dad, who served as mayor of Mamaroneck from 1963 to 65. Born and bred in Mamaroneck, loved the friendly village and loved serving it. Yeah, besides the school board, trustee, mayor, the Mamaroneck Fire Company was near and dear to his heart. He was their treasurer for 62 years. He was born in 1897 and lived on Spruce Street. His mother was Laura Adele Turner, whose father, James Turner, I believe, was responsible for building some of the older houses on Barry Avenue. Not Barry, Melbourne. And his father was Stephen Smith. They moved to Melbourne Avenue, lived in, I think, 2 or 3 houses, and his father passed away when he was only 9 years old. So he moved into the old Turner homestead with his sister Helen, who is 90 years old now. We just had a nice 90th birthday for her. She's up in the Bethel Methodist home. And his mother with her 2 sisters, and he grew up in that household. He ran into, I have to give equal time because my mother was born and bred in Mamaroneck too. She was born to Ray Baxter and Catherine Kohler. And my grandfather, Ray Baxter, was from another old family in Mamaroneck. Some of you might remember Baxter's Hardware store years ago. And I have one cute story I came to my mind. You talk about déjà vu. My grandmother, I used to love to go to the village with her, and I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And we used to go down, and she'd stop in at the Union Savings Bank to visit her brother-in-law, Charles Baxter Sr., who was the president of the bank. And right now, our daughter, Mary, the pretty redhead there, is in charge of the tellers, and her desk is in about the same spot his desk was. Yeah, and you had a nice program on about D.W. Griffith, and I was looking through my mother's scrapbook, and over the top of a program for the show in New York City they attended, way down east, and she has written, "We got engaged."
Oh, that's sweet. Oh, thank you so much for telling about it. Now, Dick.
Gracie, your time's running short on you. Why don't you cover people who have something a little bit more important to say than I do?
Oh, yours is important, too.
Not.
Well, I'll come back then. Okay.
I'm the junior man.
Well, okay.
I'm the junior.
We'll fight over you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, fine, Tex. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And our hostess.
Grace.
Hi,
Grace.
Otex.
It is a great pleasure when you're 35 years old to be up here and speak to you wonderful people. I am the goodwill ambassador of the village of Mamaroneck, and it gives me great pleasure when I could be that of all you wonderful people here in the village of Mamaroneck and outside of the village also. I was born 1909, Sandstone's building up Mamaroneck Avenue. From there, my family moved to New Street, Serlin's building. And from there, my father built his house on Mamaroneck Avenue. That's opposite the Mamaroneck Avenue playground. And there was so much playing around that we decided, my wife and I, we moved to Hillcrest Court Apartments up the Heights. And we are very, very thankful, not only for the apartment, but for the people surrounding us and all of you wonderful people in the village of Mamaroneck. I, as your ambassador of goodwill, would not be goodwill only because I am grateful that I am goodwill because of you wonderful people here this evening and elsewhere in the village of Mamaroneck and the surroundings of the village of Mamaroneck. And
I would like to ask you a question.
yes.
I know your mother was midwife.
Oh, yes.
Very, very many births.
Yes.
Who was midwife for her at your birth?
My grandmother, I meant to bring it up. My grandmother was a great midwife from New York, and she came to Mamaroneck to bring me on the surface from my mother, which was a great midwife, and she served and brought into this here village of Mamaroneck and the surroundings of the village of Mamaroneck many children. And I know there are a few of them alive yet, and I'm very grateful for that. And I like to say in all sincerity, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not much of a speaker because when I go home, my wife will tell me, you shouldn't have said that, or you shouldn't have said that.
Okay, Tex.
Thank
you.
Thank you very
much appreciate
ladies and
it.
gentlemen. God bless you all. Thank you.
Gene?
Thank you,
Gene
Grace.
Ryan.
We're running out of time. And
And
thank you, Grace. And it's a privilege.
I used to go there when he was a boy.
Very good, Dick. Keep coming, Dick. I want to thank you, Grace, for the privilege of being amongst these distinguished gentlemen. I know most of them were very friendly with my mother and dad. Tex mentioned the Sandstone building. That was my grandfather's building. My mother was a Sandstone. And Tex, we were your landlord at that time, right? My grandfather?
Yes.
Okay. Not too much.
I don't know. I think I paid them.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Very good. But it's been a pleasure to be here. And about Mamaroneck, I was born 1922. I'm a young Mamaroneckian. Yes. And my territory was Prospect Avenue. We lived at the foot of Prospect Avenue, which is the Marcellini now owns that house. And my thrill as a child was being woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning from my Aunt Polly. She had the Pollyanna Tea Room, which was down below the building that we lived in. And she woke us up, and at that time there was a big fire on Post Road. All those buildings on the Post Road were burning up. She clothed us, she took us back to Aloisi's house down in the back, and she let us. The ones on the Post Road from Holy Trinity to the Union Saving Bank. Those homes was John. What year was that about? You remember that one? I was about 8 or 9 years old, so it must have been around the 30s. They were the flames. They were all burned out. Most of them. There was a few remaining, and what's his name? The contractor was digging up one of the houses on Post Road, and he came across an old brick oven that used to belong to a fellow by the name of Myers. My dad used to buy the hot dog rolls from him in those days, but that was it. And it's a pleasure to be here, Grace. Thank you. And
thank you. Now, I want to just bring in Dick Lederer, because Dick, you told me that you used to go when you were a boy to Walter's hot dog stand.
That's right. I went to junior high school here in this building in 1927, 28, and 29. And my mother used to give me 35 cents a day to eat in the cafeteria here. I don't remember that the food was poisonous, but it was not exactly gourmet food either. So at least once a week I used to sneak across the street to have a hot dog at Walter's, which is where I had supper tonight. So 60 years later, I guess I'm one of the earliest of Walter's patrons in this location.
And did you have a hot dog?
Oh, I had 2 hot dogs and a coffee shake. Very good.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming, Dick. We appreciate it.
John Pedrini would like to talk about some fires in town.
Oh, great. I'm so glad you're going to do that, John.
Well, I remember one on in the back. We lived on Waverly Avenue, and my folks had 3 houses there. And I remember, I may have been about 9 years old when that lumber yard went up. It was Adam Hoffman and Howard, whatever it was. I don't remember the name.
Where was the lumberyard?
Right on Waverly Avenue and Hoyt Street, and there was a Connor's food, chicken food there. Feed store rather, and that fire went up, and this was in the I'd say about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when this fire went off, and I don't think anyone in the village knew it at the time. And a freight train went by, and they were all steam engines then, not electric trains. And this engineer, I guess he just stopped right at that fire, and he just hung on that whistle, and I think he woke all the village. Everybody in the village of Mamaroneck that night, and he alerted the people, and the fire department was there. And I think that fire lasted, if I remember now, 3 or 4 days. They had fire engines from Scarsdale, White Plains, all over the county. And I tell you, it was some fire. And where we lived, we were right in the middle of the thing. And I remember volunteers had a fire engine. I guess some of you people remembered. They had 3 red lights on it, and it circled as they went down the street. Well, they were in our yard just pouring water on the 3 houses because from the sparks it was hitting our roof, and the roofs caught fire 3 or 4 times. And I tell you, my mother was really shook up because we were all small kids at the time, and I tell you, it was really a bad fire.
Are the houses still there?
Oh yeah, all 3. All 3. Well, I was about 7 years old, and I'm about 8 years, 9, and I'm 71 now. So that goes. And my mother's house, where we lived, I understand. My uncle tells us that all the lumber came from Griffin's buildings down there when they used lumber when they built the house, and all 3 houses are still there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, did Dick Granger come? No, because he was down on our list, and so I guess everyone did arrive. Has everyone spoken? Is there now? Let's go back to the audience with the few minutes that we have. Selena, what have you got to tell us?
Well, I have lived here. Let's see.
Should I bring this over?
Oh, no. I'd also like to say that I'm here also as a trustee for the Lower Hudson Conference area, and I'm really glad to be here tonight because we cover quite a number of the counties and the different organizations in Mamaroneck and White Plains and throughout Westchester County. But I'm so happy to be here to hear these wonderful, wonderful stories about your lives here. I've only been here since 1959, so I'm not an old comer. I'm not too new either. But I am retired, and I've been working with the village and in the county. And all I can say is I'm very, very pleased to hear about your lives, and I think it's magnificent. And especially this gentleman over here, I could sit and hear him all night. Thank you.
Mrs. Quitman, you were born here too.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us?
I was born on Mamaroneck Avenue, and at that time, Emmeline's drugstore was in the next building. My father had a little fruit store, and he was a fruit peddler. And I used to deliver orders for him on a little go-kart. And if I got a nickel tip, I had to hand it in. But it was a wonderful, wonderful memories that I have of Mamaroneck.
Well, may I say to you, now that you've all spoken, how did you like Mamaroneck? The way it was or the way it is now?
Both. Both.
Somebody sum it up? Good?
Mamaroneck was
changed a bit?
Gracie, I'll wrap it up. Mamaroneck was a wonderful growing up. It was a friendly, warm community. It made you. It was home, that you belonged. The people there were friendly. They cared about you. And now here as a grown-up in this town, I find it is still a warm, friendly place that everyone really is willing to help and be friends. I am thrilled to be a resident of Mamaroneck all my life, and I'm certain all of these people join in with me in that same feeling.
And Gloria, I guess we both and all of us say we're glad it's the village of Mamaroneck, Rye Neck and Old Mamaroneck.
Oh,
and
it's the entire
ladies
community.
Holding their hands across the bridge on the little seal.
Here we go. I'm from the village of Mamaroneck, and Gracie's from the village of Rye. Here we go.
Yeah.
The seal in the village of Mamaroneck is a seal of two women joining hands over a bridge. And one of the things that we're now doing in town is we're thinking about the village of Larchmont celebrating their centennial, which was in they started in 1891, but Mamaroneck didn't start until 1895. Well, in that time, what was the delay was getting the town of Mamaroneck and the town of Rye in the village of Mamaroneck together. And sure enough, after a number of times, we did have a couple of people in the village who worked very diligently to get us working together. And so that's how the village of Mamaroneck became a village as we are now in 1895. And of course it was the two sections getting together over the bridge. And that's the bridge on the Mamaroneck River. Someone just handed me a picture. Oh.
My mother and father in the first door, Mamaroneck.
Oh, wait, let me.
Back in 1924.
Let's see, can you get it? I'm going to. Mr. and Mrs. Praken in front of their store.
Opened.
They had just opened? What, is this the bakery?
No, stationery.
The stationery store, Praken Stationery Store.
I was born here.
Oh, okay. When did they open, dear?
21 or 24?
21, 22, 23, 24, one of those years.
Young man, Sonny Grippo there, and I don't know who the others are.
Uh-huh. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing it. Wonderful. Thank you.
Gloria, are we still on the air?
Yes, we are.
I thought that you were going to end at 9, so we... Right.
Yes.
Because Daddy showed that picture. When we were kids, my father used to take us.
Wait just a moment. Hold on.
My father used to take us as a treat to Daddy's father's soda fountain.
Yeah, that's Charlotte Ruth.
And I always used to order a sundae. I went to New Rochelle once, and I'm yelling at the guy, I want a Praken special. And the guy says, what's a Praken special?
Well, what is a Praken special?
Whatever her father prepared for us.
Wonderful. That's the kind of a town we were. You see? The storekeeper is ready to satisfy every little child. Gracie, why don't we finish off with you showing your painting here?
Oh, well, that was a memory that I brought, too. Are we switching? Okay. That's a memory from my backyard. And when we came here, my memory is this apple tree. When we came here in 1947, this was the most gorgeous apple tree, and it looked like you could just put your hand out from our porch and pick it like a bunch of flowers. And it had been there, the house was built in 1880, and that apple tree had withstood all the winds and storms, and around it was the old-fashioned table to sort out your apples, and we used to pick them up and wrap them in newspaper and put them in the attic. And then what happened? My memory blew down, and that was that. And next door, here was our little next-door neighbor, Martha Doty, and her boyfriend. And so I put them in, and not this time, but another time, he was down there with her, and something happened, and he backed up, and he backed right down into the creek. Backwards, nothing happened. He was safe. There was no water there. He didn't hit his head. So we have great, wonderful memories of Guyon Creek. And right over here, right now, there's a swan nesting. And we pray. Every time I look out the window, every time I go down to my studio, I look to see she's still there. So I hope she makes it this time. Thanks a lot. I'm so glad you came. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, all you wonderful people who came. I'm sorry for the ones who missed it, but there's always next year. So long.